I gave people all the stuff they really needed. Social security checks, utility bills, TV guide.
I want a TV guidance counselor. TV guidance counselor. Staying up to watch all night, and everything's gonna be alright with my TV guidance counselor.
Hey everybody, welcome to TV Guidance Counselor. I am Ken Reed, as always, your TV Guidance Counselor, and this is the show where each and every week since Valentine's Day 2014, I know, we've been discussing classic television, pop culture, and interesting stories about growing up and people's work with interesting people, usually using, I don't even drink, that's a tongue twister that I should do like backstage before my various theater work. Usually using a back issue of TV Guide magazine from my personal collection as an inspiration for our conversation, but this week, we use a different primary source material, and that is the book, The Plus One, Getting By on Good Connections in the Analog Age by David Klein, because my guest this week is author David Klein. David is the cousin of Winona Ryder, Be Still My Heart, but is an author in his own right. You can go to davidkleinauthor.org, and I have links in the show description here or wherever books are sold. He's got a few books out. If Six Was Nine, I Am the Fly, but The Plus One is his newest one. It's a great memoir. We talk about it here, but it's sort of very TV Guidance Counselor adjacent. How you grew up and the pop culture that you consumed and how it sort of fits into your personal experience. It's very sort of Wonder Years, Freaks and Geeks, Pete and Pete-ish, very Northeast. I very much enjoyed it. It's a quick read and it's very good. You should check it out. But if you're on the fence, this conversation with David will absolutely sway you. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's episode of TV Guidance Counselor with my guest, author David Klein.
TV is my friend, and it has been always there for me in time of need.
Live via satellite from North Carolina, David Klein. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. I'm happy to be here.
I think you might be the first person that I've had on the show who was physically in North Carolina. This might be a first.
Well, being physically in North Carolina, worse things could happen.
Yes, some people were mentally there.
Then again, depending on where you are in North Carolina.
That's true. That is also true. I haven't been down there in a long time, but I did a comedy festival in South Carolina, and we did some shows in North Carolina. I mean, this was like 15 years ago, but the food was good. I recall that.
Indeed. There's some good food to be had.
But you grew up in New Jersey, New York area, right? So how'd you end up in North Carolina?
Basically, we were living on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, my wife and I, and we had twin toddlers. And she received an offer to work down at Duke. And her folks lived down here, and it kind of resembled my suburban childhood in Jersey. And it wasn't that hard of a choice. The kids were getting bigger, apartment was getting smaller, and so it was a good move. It's been a good place. We have a little backyard where the kids could run around.
That's a good entryway into the book, because the hook of the book is that your cousin is Winona Ryder. I guess that's kind of but it's almost it's almost a minor detail in this great sort of memoir of growing up, in that it's, the reason I think you're a great guest for this show is because you do a great job at tying sort of pop culture to our personal experiences, where they're sort of shared yet personal at the same time. Those of us who kind of grew up pre-millennium, and your main thing's kind of mixtapes, but you really cover the gamut of things there. And the stuff in New Jersey, having grown up in suburban Boston, resonated with me. So, it's like, it's pretty much the same.
Yeah, it's the story of a life that happens to have Winona Ryder as a frequent walk-on character.
Yeah.
Which is so cool. Of course, everyone can relate to that. And my life is not, I haven't been traumatized too much. I lived a fairly comfortable life, and yet lives are interesting for the details, and have had my share of pain and excitement, and definitely the fact that I've crossed paths with people like Winona and spent time with, kind of real iconic figures, not just passing through, but people who are still of interest in 2025 has been definitely makes my it's been an added texture to the story I have to tell.
Because you've done so much cool stuff, but yeah, it's sort of this Zelig-like trip that sort of over and above Winona. There's, you know, your roommate's dating Marisa Tomei at one point in New York. You know, your dad is a physician, and he was like Jimi Hendrix's doctor. Like, there's so many weird, you know, people that you run into over and above that. I mean, part of that I think is probably being in New York, New Jersey at the time is probably part of it.
It is. It certainly has something to do with the socioeconomic, milieu that I was living in, I suppose. You know, you're not going to run into these people if you're kind of not living in a certain kind of place, I suppose. You know, I had an amazingly memorable flight with Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers.
Yes. And you're like 17, 18, right?
Yeah, 17. And, you know, my parents could put me on a plane because I screwed up because I got kicked off a teen tour.
In Boston.
In Boston.
You're in Boston, yeah.
That's right, yeah. You know, and so I realized all this, you know. I showed this book to some people, to a guy, and he was like, you know, there really aren't a lot of black people in your story. And I'm like, well, I'm sorry, you know, that's just was how it went.
Yeah.
So yeah, I realize I'm coming from this, and that's a little bit why I self-published this book, because the memoirs that people want to publish these days are about the most effed up lives.
Yeah.
It's like, who can have the most effed up memoir? You know, whose father was a cross-dressing evangelist who, you know, anyway, I'll stop.
Yeah.
But
who's worse than Brian Wilson? This guy. It's Brian Wilson's dad. Let this guy.
You think you had a messed up childhood? Check mine out.
Yeah.
So no, I just had the usual ups and downs, but I think some of those are pretty poignant. You know, I was the middle child. I had a pretty. My brother was just a certifiable genius. He was the smart guy in the family. My dad really didn't think I was much of a student, and he was probably right. And it was so. Those are all things that are really relatable. And yet, there I was going to the premiere of Night on Earth with Jim Jarmusch and with Winona and yet the family stuff comes in. Like, even I remember that night, my sister, like the next day, she said, "Why didn't you call me?" And I was like, I don't know. I was kind of tripping the light fantastic.
There's a lot going on.
There was stuff happening, you know? So, yeah. So yeah, it's interesting to sort of, I really wanted to mix those elements that are kind of intriguing to people with the way they kind of bounced off my own existence.
Because music is like the kind of the core sort of pop culture artifact, I think, throughout the whole thing. TV does fit in quite a bit. There, you know, there's, and I think your brother is first writing gig. He's like writing TV reviews for the school paper or something. I think you include something in there. And then, you know, we'll talk about your brother in a moment, but he went on to essentially run MTV Europe, like, again, over and above everything else, which was another sort of link for you to meet all these people. But yeah. Music, there's sort of two, I call it like the cool older brother syndrome isn't the right word, but effect, which is kind of what mixtapes are. And in some regard, it's literal in your case, but then also, you know, other people sort of had that function for you, and you had that function for other people, including your cousin. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that makes this book sort of interesting, because it is depicting an era that is really not in effect anymore. We get your mixtape, you know, we know how it used to be. An older brother, best friend, college roommate, or whatever it was, the coolest kid on the block. That's how you found stuff out. And now, I'm not saying I'm being a Luddite, but things change. But it was kind of cool to discover things that way. And it was kind of cool to be someone who was in possession of the knowledge of these certain songs, and not everyone did. And so to be the guy to turn Winona onto the Replacements, her being the world's most famous Replacements fan, that was kind of cool. And I had that same effect. I used to dream, like, God, if I could just send a song to somebody, you know, like a gift. And it's like, how easy is it to send a song, you know? But I always wanted to do that. So sending these mixtapes were really heartfelt. And, you know, I talk about like making a tape for Johnny Depp and Winona when they were filming Edward Scissorhands,
Right.
you know, and who was on it, and what was on it, and all that stuff. And it's like a time capsule at this point. It seemed like just like anecdotal stuff, but now it seems more precious than ever.
Because it's a snapshot of where your head was at that time too. Like, you know, you're essentially making it for someone else, but also, you know, at least I know when I would make those things, there was like, you know, the phases you're going through, that sort of thing. And the other thing about like sort of analog media, is, and I talk about on this show a lot, is that there's an investment, right? So even if it's nominal, like, you know, with a mixtape, someone put in the time to make that for you. So though it didn't cost you anything, you're going to sit, you're going to listen to the whole thing. And a lot of times you might not like most of the songs on there, but then like eventually they click, or, you know, you bought that record that was your choice for the month, or, you know, every 2 months or whatever, you had money to buy a record. And by God, you're going to listen to that thing until you goddamn like it. And those become your favorite records. Though you can't just go no, because everything's free.
No, you have to let it play, and you're like, all right, my friend made this for me. I'm going to listen to it. There's heart in it, you know. It's really different to say you got to hear this Spotify stream. It's less intimate, you know. It's like a handwritten letter versus an email.
And access is also a thing. Like, you know, hunting down rare records and stuff was always such a thing for me. And it's funny now when I see people younger than us who collect vinyl, but I'm like, but why? You could, like, I was hunting down that stuff so I could hear it. Like, you couldn't find those records. Now I'm like, I don't, if I could just download it, I would have been fine. But instead I had to go look, you know, to other countries and look through bins.
It's true, and vinyl is still kind of like an authentic thing that kind of hasn't changed so much. You still have to flip through the bins and everything. But, you know, now that people are sitting there with their phones and checking out the Discogs price when they're, you know, it takes a lot of the mystery out of it. And the pricing, people are a little more savvy. It's like, oh, you know, it's like you're not going to find that stuff, crazily priced stuff, unless you're at some, I don't know, Goodwill in the middle of America.
Even then, you get people scanning.
Most of the stores, you know, okay, I found two kind of stores. The stores that like know how things are priced, and then you go to a place like, say, Woodstock or some sort of pricey town, and then they have like 12 Dan Fogelberg albums for $20 each.
Yeah.
It's just bizarre. So yeah, vinyl's kind of kooky now, but I still treasure my vinyl.
Do you have like a holy grail record that you were looking for forever that you finally found growing up?
I think it was this Donovan record that my uncle gave to me in 1970, which was after his psychedelic period, called Open Road. He started a new band. I don't know. My brother and I used to quote these songs to each other, these lyrics, and it was the record that nobody had. And I found that in a Goodwill kind of thing, and I was pumping my fist. But, you know, things like that have happened to me.
Do you ever meet Ione Skye in your travels? There's similar circles of people.
I never met Ione Skye.
Oh, she's great. I've had her on the show, but yeah, Donovan is her dad, if people don't know. But yeah. I'm like, oh, she would be in the crowd that you're mixing with a lot of these things.
Yeah, somehow I missed her. Yeah, you know, I think about some of the people I met sort of like moving through spaces, parties with Winona. I do remember one that I didn't write about in the book was we met Dylan, and he was all about Dinosaur Jr. All he wanted to talk about was Dinosaur Jr. He's really authentically, and Willie Bobo. Willie Bobo as well. And I kind of remember he had this great way of saying Willie Bobo, you know, just like Matt Dillon would do it. So
it's very Matt Dillon. So many, you know, growing up in Boston too, and in the Northeast, we had so many of these great bands too, like these alt rock bands, which, you know, Dinosaur Jr., the Pixies, Throwing Muses, yes, Belly, just Julian Hatfield, like insane. And it's weirdly, I've ended up having a bunch of them on the show over time.
About Willie Alexander?
Oh yeah, he's up in Gloucester these days still.
Actually, okay, I wrote this number song book about number songs and music. He has a song called Rock and Roll 78, and that was my, like, you know, I went from 1 to, you know, 0 to 100 best number song for each slot. So Willie Alexander's Rock and Roll 78 was my 78 song, not that there were a lot of them, but he was awesome. He wrote back and told me the origin, and it was all based on sort of, there was like two 50s chord progressions, you know, and this was like the second one.
Yeah, yeah.
But it was neat to actually like to meet a guy in your record collection. I still, I've been in lots of cool parties and stuff, but somehow when talking to somebody who's in your record collection is kind of like one of the best things that can happen to you.
Yeah, especially someone like that who is still sort of unheralded. Like he was sort of a Boston institution, but he was in the Velvet Underground for the, their second iteration. And
exactly right there.
Wrote great songs. Yeah. It's crazy. But you've run into like John Cale and those people. Like there's a lot of Velvet Underground people that pop up in there.
That was at the Great Balls of Fire
premiere.
Wigfield, which was really star-studded. And it's amazing when you think about these things in retrospect. It's like, everyone's like, oh, that was the biggest bomb in the world, And yet, God, all the people, the stars came out. And Winona would laugh at this because we have an Uncle Lou. And Uncle Lou's thing is he'd always, no matter what, he'd always be like, how'd you get here? That was his whole thing. How'd you get here? And he'd say, oh, I took the Kosciuszko Bridge. There was a little traffic, a little congestion. I got into the right lane. He was like that guy. He literally asked Jerry Lee Lewis how he got there. Yeah. So we got to witness that. So even if the movie bombed, there was some wonderful surrealistic shit that happened.
That's a very Jewish uncle thing. I remember on SCTV, if you're an SCTV fan, Eugene Levy used to play a character named Sid Dithers.
Oh, totally.
And the first thing he would do is every time someone would come up, he goes, it would always be if they mentioned San Francisco, and he goes, San Francisco, did you drive or did you flew? Like, and he's asking him, and I'm like, that's
it's in our DNA, man. It really is. The funny thing is, Noni has kind of got that Jewish humor. I think she's shticky, she's funny. I will tell you that we had been apart. We really got out of touch for a while, and my mom died earlier, like about a year ago.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, and I hadn't seen Noni in years. She held my hand throughout that entire ceremony. She was just like such a great sight to see because, like, it was like, as we say in the Jewish, there was a fair amount of mishigas going on with all the death and the family stuff. And she just took my arm and she was like, and also she looked like a moppet in mourning. She was black, but she had, she was just such a delight. She made me happy on that very sad day. And we just sat and goofed and talked about it. And she's like, oh my God, you wouldn't believe it. This,
Yeah,
she was just being her adorable self. She's very tactile. She holds your hand. She looks right at you. She was the highlight of my mom's funeral, put it that way.
That's quite a review.
Oh, the thing about Noni, I say this in my book, but some people light up a room, but I think my distinction is that people light up when she enters the room, and she lit me up in that day.
Yeah, it's like an infectious sort of. Yeah,
it is. Yeah. So the thing is, before she was famous or even got into movies, what I would hear from, because we were in Jersey and they were on the West Coast. They'd go out, they were living in like San Francisco area, and they'd go out and they'd take a bus and somebody would start talking to her and would like say, you have to come stay at my villa. Things like that. She had this spark that people responded to like literally on buses. They wanted to take her home.
Some people have the thing. It's weird. Like you feel it and it's strange and
It's rare though.
It is.
Yeah, I like you, Ken. I don't know if you have that.
I definitely don't.
I don't know if it's so freaking rare. And she even had like such, the whole debacle, the early aughts and everything. It went away because there's something about her that it didn't stick.
Yeah. Well, also in the scheme of things, if we've seen people since then, you're like, that wasn't a big deal.
Really? You actually screwed up?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, that's fine. You're a human being. You're not a monster like so many people are.
I know. I love the fact that people just generally root for her.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to, honestly, like a lot of the people in my book, who I have the most intimate interactions with, Johnny Depp, Bono, a lot of people are really down on those people.
Yeah.
For whatever reason. Gwyneth Paltrow even, there's a lot of poop. But people just love Noni, and I love that. It makes it a lot easier.
I feel like she never, and I swear we won't talk about her the whole time, because I'm sure everyone that you encounter is just like, I have a crush on your cousin, which they do, but
Fair enough. I'm just trying to give you a good selection of my kind of maybe not even book related.
Yeah, no, totally. I know it'd be, I'm sure it's annoying for you after a while when everyone's like, hey, but it's, I feel like she never seemed out of touch with people in a way that like Gwyneth Paltrow did, or Johnny Depp went down this thing where he's like, are you a human being anymore? Like you're
the jewel-studded goblets full of $30,000 wine.
Yeah.
No, I guess what I would say is she's always been she's almost reclusive and has never wanted to be in the public eye. Other folks embrace it. A lot of these folks have been sort of come under scrutiny, and it's not been the case with her. I think that whenever you see anything, whether it's her birthday or anything, it's just like goddess, queen.
Yeah, it's all positive. Yeah.
It is positive.
Yeah, it's there are a few. I mean, part of it's guys too. There are very few sort of Hollywood men that, especially since doing this show, as long as I have been working with people,
interesting.
that I only hear good stories about. There's like a small group. John Candy's one of them.
No, it's like I don't know, Keanu Reeves. People
he's
say
another.
like. They're just like, it's such a rare quality that nobody like hates on you, and that's sad.
Yeah.
But it's a lot. I don't know. I think everyone deserves another. Deserves a screw up. I mean, I was thinking about. I remember just like thinking, God, how much scrutiny can a person handle? To have to go out and look perfect and say the right things. Maybe she said something in an interview that didn't parse well, and people like pounced on it. It's really hard.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's really not for the faint of heart.
No, I mean, even like in your book, you relay sort of very minor screw ups of your own that are like very common young person screw ups that it's like for some people that would have been like career ending just because they were in a spotlight, but it's not like it's kind of like a big deal, guys. Come on, people do these things.
Yeah, well, having suffered multiple screw-ups to be a happily, a person who's sort of, I can look back on these moments happily. I've got, crazy about my wife. My kids fascinate me, and, writing and editing and having a happy life. And it was a lot of uncertainty. And it just, you can't compare yourself to your social circle too much.
So I don't have children, which is by design because of my family. But as someone who's sort of a fellow sort of pop culture, I don't want to insult you by calling you an obsessive, but that it's like linked into your experiences, right? So, it's soundtracked, there's certain movies, there's certain books, there's certain TV shows, music that are like intrinsically linked to memories, strong memories from your childhood. As a parent now, do you feel obligated to try and like curate or program that stuff for your kids?
I felt so obligated. And some of those I have, and it's been with such a learning experience because I've surrounded my kids with music, and there was a moment when I was trying to do the Days in the one with Phillip Seymour Hoffman,
oh, yeah.
Almost Famous. I tried to do the curated, classic rock, and my son, it started to build up, and then one day. He was 15 and he said, Dad, I basically stream my music. You can stop.
Yeah.
It wasn't mean, but he was saying, please don't bring me any more records.
He's doing you a favor, saving you some time.
Yeah. And it's not like he's not musical. I mean, he played the trombone. He's in college now. He took ballroom dancing and he was like in love with it. He loves music. But like not the music I curated so carefully. I have CDs called Birth like Albatross by Fleetwood Mac, amniotic music. I was really going for this mood, and it was so, they were the best mixes. I started making mixes for my friends, and I made mixes for my toddlers, and they were like, okay, this works, but eventually they kind of moved on. And you just do the best you can. You can't. But I see other parents who kind of bring up their kids, and the kids are like, look at my kid, he loved the Ramones. It just.
Who doesn't? That's not a win.
It's just funny though, but some kids just take after their parents, and my kids refuse to sort of do it too much, like a lockstep thing. And I think music's in them somehow, but it's not like they'll never be obsessive like me.
Is there anything they introduced you to?
Well, occasionally they do that now. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, actually, one of my sons was real into this band, and then it was terrible. The music was terrible, and then the guy turned out to be like a sodomite or something.
Wonderful.
It was like I can't remember the name. It was terrible, but it was like, oh, thanks, Nathan. Awesome.
Sometimes in those cases, you're like, well, I'm kind of glad that the person who made bad music is a bad person. Now I don't feel bad about disliking it.
It would suck if the actually was a good song.
Yeah.
No, this is tawdry and horrible, just like they were.
How much more art do I have to separate from artists? Come on.
It's a Caravaggio. It's like, okay, I'm going to accept he was a murderer.
Right.
I can't remember the name of the band, which
It was different times then. But speaking of your brother, who ended up working at MTV News for a while, and I've had Tabitha Soren's been on the show. It was great. Oh. And then sort of managed to parlay that into being kind of king of the world of MTV Europe, right?
Yeah. For a while, it was a real new frontier. And my bro was doing this show that, and they had all this money and all this budget, and it was this incredibly mind-blowing show.
Buzz?
Buzz, that was like at a hyper pace, and it was so experimental, and they were like totally jacked up when they were doing it, and like let's do this and let's do that.
It's the late 80s.
Live cutting, and they basically had two speeds, Coke and heroin. But it was really very mind-blowing. They talked about all sorts of really interesting, groundbreaking artists who were working at the time, Jenny Holzer, and then so Mark Pellington, who was one of the directors with my brother, ended up being this very major music director who directed the Jeremy for Pearl Jam, and did all this stuff for U2's tour, the Zoo TV tour with all those crazy, fast-moving, montages and stuff, and it was all happening and so this show was this exciting thing, and yet it was totally got canceled really fast. It was totally untenable, But I was just sort of watching it naively, just thinking my brother's the king of the world. He's doing this show, and it was basically a failure. A groundbreaking, some might say, flop. But you don't realize it when you're that close to it,
But the best things sort of are, like, what's the, I forget what music journalist said this, like, not a lot of people bought the first Velvet Underground record, but everyone who did started a band.
Yeah, I think that was Brian Eno.
Yeah.
Who said, but yeah, it's true. Some people really cite Buzz as like kind of sort of like a harbinger of that whole, like the style that sort of pervaded MTV after that, which was more hyper, more like in your face, very, very much in your face. So they made their mark. But, as I said it was very future looking, but as I said in the book, you can read the bus, you can see the future, but still misread the bus schedule.
Yeah, totally.
They were a little ahead of their time, but it was neat to just sort of try to to just basically think my brother was a genius for doing that. And of course I was working at a literary agency, trying to write my short stories and, trying to keep up with everybody, everybody was doing some really cool stuff. And I was, I guess that's the pain and the poignancy of the book.
But I don't feel like you come across as feeling competitive in the book. Like it doesn't.
No, I just wanted to find my thing.
Yeah.
I didn't want to beat anybody.
Yeah.
But it was really hard when you don't know what you're good at, and eventually I think you find it. Hopefully you find it,
Yeah.
But a lot of people find it, the savvy ones find it quickly, and then you're sort of sitting there saying, I need to get with the program. I got to find my thing too, And I was literally at this, working at this literary agency, surrounded by all these smart people who were writing, and I was like evaluating novels and evaluating manuscripts and then writing my own stuff. And then I left and sent a few stories to one of the young agents I'd become friends with, and he literally said, "I'm not sure this even qualifies as short stories."
That's almost an impressive no.
It's a good no. It's a good hard no. I learned from that no.
Yeah.
I did. You're absolutely right, Ken. The stuff that, I don't know, it's like the things that stick with you often are like those prods and pokes and like, ooh, those moments where someone kind of called your number.
But that you got a strong reaction. Like, as someone who creates things, it's almost like the worst possible thing could be someone was like, I was bored, I don't even remember it.
Yeah, it's true. You totally you drew out of the line, outside of the line so much that I have to at least call that out.
Yeah. It's like I always, as a big movie nerd, I'm like, the worst crime a movie can commit is being boring. Like, if I hate a movie but really hate it, like, I enjoyed watching it because I enjoyed like hate watching. You know what I mean? It's still like I didn't feel like I wasted my time.
No, that's the worst crime. And it's sort of, when I'm writing now, I keep in mind the idea that if there's no conflict, if there's no crisis, you're going to bore people to death. So
sometimes, unless you're one of those few people who can just write atmosphere that somehow is engaging, there's like 4 people who can do that.
Okay, yeah, 4 people can do that. But most of the time, you want a story that that has got the right words,
right,
and pulls you along and doesn't insult your intelligence.
And it's a story. But the sort of vibe of the book reminded me of, you mentioned Almost Famous, and I did get sort of Almost Famous vibes in that, partially because Led Zepplin has a couple chapters mentioned in there, but also it's like Wonder Years meets Almost Famous, I guess I would call it.
You know what? I had that. I thought it was Wonder Years meets Almost Famous meets Dazed and Confused. Yeah. Because some of the Dazed and, I'm still amazed as a parent of the stuff that we did routinely as 13 and 14-year-olds back in Tenafly, New Jersey, going to the tracks with an ill-gotten 6-pack of beer, smoking Marlboros, beating each other up. It was, and that was Friday night, and you came home.
There was no internet.
My kids have never spent a night like that. I can guarantee you, and I don't think most kids do these days. It's just, we were unsupervised. And that's why I think it's was worth writing about, because our parents were a little checked out. They didn't really mind it as long as you didn't come home bloody. Yep. I think it was pretty okay. My parents would sniff to see if I smelled, what kind of smoke I smelled like, but there was, I don't know, there was just more like freedom to walk around. We didn't obviously have phones and stuff like that. And you were kind of free to make the most of, 8 o'clock to midnight.
Right. As long as you made it home on your own volition, someone didn't bring you home, it was fine.
That's right. I know. And it's just, it sounds so quaint, but the recent generations do not live that way.
No.
They're just, parents are on top of it. And I don't think it's necessarily bad, but we misbehaved a hell of a lot because no one was paying attention.
Yeah, and that's how people learn too. Like, that chapter especially resonated with me a lot. Like, as someone growing up, I've never drank or done a drug in my life, and I was a pretty boring, nerdy kid. I would sit and read books and watch movies. But obviously, like everyone I grew up with, that's what they were doing. And I actually told this in one of my stand-up albums, but this is true. There was a park behind my house that kids would drink at on Saturday nights, and if I would get particularly bored, I'd call the cops on them just because it was fun to watch them run away. And then I would go I would see where they hid their beers, and I would take them and then sell them back to them at school the next week. And they never figured this scheme out. Like, they never figured out in years.
That is sort of reprehensible.
It is now, but I'm going
to allow it, though.
Yeah, fair enough. And the only place I had heard of Tenafly from is, are you familiar with the movie Street Trash?
No.
It's
I keep up on Tenafly stuff.
It's a made in New York low budget, sort of weird horror comedy from the mid 80s. A guy who was a film professor at NYU made it. And there's a bad batch of alcohol called Tenafly Viper that makes bums melt in different colors. And it's
that is insane.
Yeah.
That is like the best Tenafly reference I've ever heard. There was actually a extremely short-lived TV series about a cop called Tenafly. That was his name. It ran for like one season, but that is way better. You never trumped that.
Yeah, I was like, oh, that's the Tenafly, because the whatever booze was supposed to be from that part of New Jersey.
Somebody must have had a connection.
It had to.
It's a weird town. It's definitely led to some interesting people. Leslie Gore, interesting. The Lord Algies, who are two like producers who've done some very cool '90s stuff. Lived like we're there. We're Tenaflinians and Paul Anka, Jimmy Dean. I think that's it. But
that's a good amount.
Good, and of course Glen Miller. Glen Miller lived right around the corner from me in this Tudor mansion called the Cotswold. He sold more records than Elvis.
Yeah,
it was like enormous pop stardom happening in Tenafly. If you put together the collective sales of Leslie Gore, Paul Anka, Jimmy Dean, and Glen Miller, wow,
yeah,
you really have something. And it's funny because the Cotswold, this mansion that he lived in, was built by a guy from England, not just from England, but from Liverpool.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I contend that Tenafly is sort of haunted by musical ghosts.
Chapter in there where you and go and visit your brother when he's working on MTV Europe and visit him in London. Was that the first time you'd been there?
No, I had been to. I think I'd been to London before, but it was never quite like as a Yeah, I was there as a kid. Right? We took a family vacation and misbehaved, but it was way, way different. Being there when my bro was the toast of the town.
Sure.
And meeting all kinds of interesting people. And so that, it was a beautiful time to be in London and walk around with my Walkman, listening to tapes that I just made in his apartment from all these amazing European imports, and it was a very analog time. I recall I write about seeing Withnail and I in a theater and enjoying a pint in a darkened theater, and how grown up and cool that felt,
When I was I went to college at Goldsmiths in London, and my screenwriting teacher was the guy who wrote with Nell and I.
Oh, I mean,
which was nuts.
I have no words for that. I mean, it took me years to kind of I don't think I took it in all what it was when I was young. And there's so much of it. It's like the timing, the pausing. It's like, it's like a Pinter play or something, but
all the music that you were especially getting into at that time too, that's like a prime time to be in London. Like you're like in Jesus and Mary Chain and Stone Roses and Julian Cope and, all this stuff like it's all happening.
It was a really exciting time, I mean, just think about to be like someone goes, oh, you have to hear this band, the Pixies. And you're like, oh, that sounds like kind of poppy and cool and fun. And it's like actually like really transgressive and scary and crazy and, and like mind blowing. It was like that. It was like, it was a great time to discover stuff. And I feel that it was a fine time just to be young and curious.
But there's also a social aspect of a lot of stuff aside from being a curator of stuff for your friends and when someone introduced you to something that became something you absolutely loved, that was like, okay, we're best friends now forever. There was also an aspect of if somebody had seen a movie that you liked, or, if someone had seen Eraserhead or Blade Runner or whatever, or, loved this one record you like without knowing anything else about this person, you're like instantly like, we're going to be friends. And that sort of doesn't exist now because everything's sort of accessible.
Yeah, I agree with that. And and that was the lingua franca of falling in love or meeting people, becoming best friends. I guess what I've learned, though, is that I always was convinced that the woman I would fall in love with would love XTC the same way I did, things like that. And it's like, it didn't work out quite that way.
No.
I remember my wife said, I just like stupid pop music. I'm like, well, so do I. That's good. That's a start. But she's like, don't expect us to bond on I know your music's your thing. But it's like, we have so bonded. We have found so many things that we do love together. It's music. You can't lose with it.
Yeah. Sometimes it's like, oh, this is better. It's complementary. I'll fill these gaps and you the other ones.
Yeah, I ascribe to the jigsaw puzzle metaphor of life, of love, which is just that you just fill in each other's spaces. You don't want to marry yourself.
No. Oh God, no.
That would be.
I think that's a Twilight Zone.
That is. Forget I even said it. But you want to, But you definitely want to find those few threads that are
oh, for sure.
But beyond that, it's great. The differences make life much more interesting and make that connection more solid, I think.
Did you see the XTC documentary a couple of years back?
I think I did.
Good. Yeah, it was about the stage fright and all the weird. Yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah, I'll throw this in it for Noni Files. I was always the biggest XTC fan, and she had a very, very inclusive sense of music. She never liked XTC. She never
didn't do it for her.
She finally, she's like Skysby. That was our little pet nickname. Please, I just don't think I like XTC.
It's not going to happen.
It was tough. It was tough because also I talk about this because she was, so receptive and I was the master. And then there we are getting ready for the MTV Video Awards in 1997 or 98. And, she's controlling the stereo, and it's like, it's Fleetwood Mac over and over again because she's kind of on a kick because she and Stevie Nicks are friends now, and where's my mix? It's suddenly I'm not that guy anymore.
Lost my mojo.
Yeah, it was like I kind of had gotten to a point where you go as far as you can, and then suddenly she was stopped being represented by her parents. She was like, okay, I'm doing this myself. She kind of was doing that. She was moving out, and even reflected in the fact that she had new friends and new influences, and she didn't even need my mixtapes anymore. Not in a bad way, but she evolved.
I mean, who among us hasn't gone through a Fleetwood Mac phase because we befriended Stevie Nicks? I think it's happened to so many of us.
We've all been there. It's like, oh God, I couldn't believe he looked at you like that when he sang "Go Your Own Way."
Yeah.
That was really beyond the pale.
I do remember when Winona was up here shooting Mermaids. They shot that near the town I grew up in, so I got to go watch them shoot some of that stuff out here, which is kind of fun.
I remember being at that premiere, and it was just a modest little premiere out in somewhere in Jersey or something. Those little sort of premieres were nothing special at all. It was not a big deal, but I do remember that and thinking, oh, pretty adorable. Yeah, definitely adorable.
Especially with Cher, who, iconic now for people, but as a kid growing up watching TV in the 70s and variety shows, that must have been, extra, that Cher.
Yeah, no, it was really, that was definitely, every step during that era was kind of interesting. And I remember Beetlejuice, my uncle, her dad, talking to me and saying, well, we just don't know how this is going to work out because it was so Tim Burton's vision. He just filmed it in chunks and pieces and stuff. And so it was all in the post-production. So it was really interesting that he said that. He said, we really don't know. It could go either way, And it's been interesting to have that inside track. I mean, I had the same inside track with Phillip Seymour Hoffman because my buddy, my best friend, was, sober friends with Phil. They were, supported each other in the 12-step program. And so I got to know him, and sort of it went from Oh wow! You wouldn't believe who's Phil's auditioning for this movie with Al Pacino. Imagine that. And then it was sort of like moved, and it's like, I remember the first one was like, wow, he's going to be in this movie with Meatloaf and Steve Martin. Woo! That was the Evangelist movie.
Yeah.
I forget, So yeah, and then after a while, so when we finally got to know to hang out together, he had just done this really bizarre movie, Todd Solondz's movie.
Oh, Hapiness. Yeah, you say to him, like, I haven't got over that yet. I also haven't. I've only seen that movie once. I have no desire to see it again.
I ever will.
No.
Yeah, it was, and he was just so funny and chucklesome about it, because I was like, because he plays the most, really just repellent, sexual deviant loser dude. And I was like, how did you do it? How did you find that character? And, and I said, well, that must have been really hard. And he said, well, the hardest part was that I had to gain 15 pounds.
I'd have no problem with that.
Yeah. And I said, well, how did you do that? He said, well, there was a college nearby, and I just ate institutional food. And it's like an instant fat.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was great. It was such a, it wasn't like, he said it was harder to, I was like, how did you find the humanity in the character? And he said it was just harder to put on the weight than to embody this really gross character. He was just a true actor, a true original.
It was almost so cartoonish that it probably didn't have to find like a human side. Like sometimes like a character that's so gross, you're like, I don't even need to, I can't act, but my acting friends will be like, oh, if I'm playing a villain or a really bad person, I have to play them like they think they're the hero, and that, I don't think they're right. They believe what they're doing is correct. And I'm like, but a character like that, Happiness, like that's not possible to do.
But he was never afraid to show the ugliness,
a
little bit of ugliness. When he barked into a phone, it was like the ugly crying version of ugly yelling. It wasn't Charlton Heston. It was kind of ugly. He was totally not afraid to go there.
The first thing I think I saw him in was in a Bob Balaban movie called My Boyfriend's Back. It was a really weird movie. It was shot as Johnny Zombie. It was like a zombie romantic comedy, like high school film. And Phillip Seymour Hoffman plays like the high school bully.
Oh, well, he'd be good at that.
Which is, now people see it and they're like, really? He's like a football jock in it.
Yeah. Well, he was. He was like a hockey player, He was never less than completely convincing. And yeah, so it was, and also, Oscar winner. I was like, I had this one year where I was like, wow, I've met the man, like Bono was like one of the men of the year.
Yeah.
Like Phillip Seymour Hoffman won the Oscar. And I was like, it's kind of funny that I crossed paths with these people.
Right.
I mean, it just is. But, at this point, I feel like they're either dead or alive, or they're dealing with their own problems of having to be 60 whatever or 70 whatever, and we're all the playing field seems a lot leveled.
It is interesting seeing Generation X hit retirement age. That's been interesting for me. I think I'm technically like an elder millennial or like tail end of Gen X, but it's been very weird to me. Yeah, seeing that, because that was like the pinnacle of cool, and sort of the era that you're living in New York, late 80s into the 90s. This is like that prime, Todd Oldham, Real World Loft House. That's the house music things going on. That's like, the Beastie Boys stuff. That's like the coolest. That's when like Gen X is really at its peak with the like 70s nostalgia reference. Like it's all there happened at that time,
But it's also pre-file sharing.
Yeah.
It's pre-digital everything. There was just a little bit of movement that still was happening in that time. And now it seemed just normal at the time, and now it seems really precious, like a really pivotal moment, because things really changed.
Well, stuff doesn't have time to grow organically now. And I think about this in music a lot of times when, there was always music scenes where there were bands that sort of existed in a small vacuum and influenced each other. So like a city would develop a sound. And, that mixed with the fact that it took a while to get technically proficient. So for the better, a lot of people developed unique styles, or, they write these sort of cracked, beautiful songs because they can't just press a button and make it be perfect. And so the fact that you can do that on the first try now and make something sound exactly like you want, where you can be like, I want the sounds from, Rumors on all these, and it goes around the world instantly. This is my old man soapbox, but it kind of makes things not get that chance to sort of marinate and season and become sort of something.
Yeah. Yeah, there was all those pregnant moments in rock, like, the early 80s where like two-tone, and it's so many, those were so exciting. And now, you have everything, but it sort of doesn't mix, it's all in boxes. It's all in your little streaming, in your playlists and things. Yeah, the organic mixing doesn't happen so easily. We have everything in the world available to us, but somehow you still need that person to go, hey, you should listen to this. Yeah. That person, that older brother, that roommate, that old friend.
Yeah, I miss like the video store clerk, like employee picks, or like it wasn't the same as an algorithm, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it ain't. It isn't, and it won't be. And hopefully, we can still and it helps maintain the human connection, because that's the beauty of it. It's like, I love this. You're gonna love this.
That's an interesting point too for me. Like you mentioned Night on Earth earlier, and I love that movie. And your cousin's been in a ton of really great movies. Is it hard for you to enjoy them in the same way because you're taken out of it a little bit? Because you're like, it's my cousin.
I think, there's certainly an element where I'm kind of reading into it, rooting for her,
right,
or whatever it might be. Yeah, it's a little different. It definitely takes. I mean, that's the thing, is like a good performance is when you forget you're watching, Nicole Kidman, right, or whoever it might be. You actually believe the character they're playing. So it's pretty. I think I kind of have, abdicated that. I'm not going to watch her and not think,
who's this?
that little scamp, that funny little girl I met at age 10, and
I feel bad you don't get to enjoy Night on Earth like the rest of us do.
But we have our own rewards.
Yeah.
It's nice. It's nice to see her face light up other people's smiles. It's exciting because she came from us. Noni and I have the same grandma. My grandmother's name was Ethel. She was beautiful, lovely woman. And Noni kind of got her beauty along with this, her mom's side, which is kind of Scandinavian. So it's a really interesting mix. And, but the fact that, my grandmother was the best, most unconditionally loving person, and we both have that. We both share that, And Noni's dad, my Uncle Mike, was my early hero, He's a writer, a hippie, music fan, everything I always wanted to be. And so it's just neat to be connected.
Did he have some connection to Timothy Leary?
He had a major connection.
Okay, because I didn't mention it in the book, but I'm like, I seem to recall this.
He was Timothy Leary's archivist.
Okay, yes.
When Timothy Leary was running from the law, Uncle Mike, that's Michael Horowitz, was the custodian of his archives, hid them from the feds.
There's a movie. I'd watch that movie.
Part of my problem was I was a first grader who had a hippie uncle. I literally had a hippie uncle. And so I was a countercultural, wise ass. And my teacher in Tenafly, New Jersey, circa 1968, didn't appreciate it.
No, they wouldn't.
They didn't dig that at all. I was already into the furry, fabulous furry freak brothers.
Right. You're reading underground comics, and that teacher's like, look, I can handle mad. That's as much as I go. Maybe cracked, but I can't go to comics or R. Crumb. I'm not going to be able to deal with that.
Way over the line. Bridge too far. So they were, and I grew up, my mom was my uncle's sister, obviously, and she married a doctor, and they settled in suburban New Jersey. So we had this dichotomy of this hip family on the West Coast, And then when they finally came over and stayed over for this, extended, unexpected snowstorm, that's when Noni and I completely bonded, where, we'd like on mixtapes and Monty Python. And so she was just like the coolest little kid you ever met. And it kind of, our relationship kind of just sort of kept on being an interesting element of my own development.
The Python thing struck me because that comes up so much. It's like the Beatles of non-music stuff for people, where it's like they bonded over Python. And
that's right.
I got the chance a few years ago to spend the day with John Cleese. I was interviewing him for a day.
Wow.
And I got to. Have you ever heard the Elvis stories about Monty Python?
I don't believe that.
So this, I didn't know if this was true. I didn't know if this was apocryphal, and Cleese confirmed that it was. I had heard that Elvis was like a crazy Monty Python fan, right? And so he bought videotape machines. This is in like 1972 to watch Monty Python, right? And he'd watch it, and then he had people transcribe all the sketches, and he would make the Memphis Mafia guys do sketches with him. And so Cleese was like,
the parrot sketch with Memphis accents.
Yeah, and that's exactly what he did. And Cleese was like, no, that's 100% true. Like he would make them do like the parrots. These guys were like, I don't know, and he's like, come on, just do whatever. And I'm like, that's
do the dead parrot.
So funny. But it's like you look at the weird, the cross section of people that show resonated with in the early 70s, and it's just nuts.
Yeah, well, you had to get it. If you didn't get it, you're probably not going to relate to people. That was like the funniest fucking thing on the planet. Your parents agreed with you. You did it. I remember even the hoods in Tenafly, who I described with their kooky little argot. I always remember one guy going like, and now the weather. That was his Monty Python. But he was watching it. Everyone was watching it.
Yeah, because it was sort of subversive, but also seemed like, do you have a favorite sketch?
Some of the really dark ones, the ones with the bookshop.
Yeah.
Charles Chickens and all the there's that one I think kind of kills me, and Eric Idle, all of Eric Idle's stuff was I liked his light touch, so Cleese was so acerbic. I don't know, but I loved them all.
They all their own thing, which is pretty great.
I mean, really, like that one sketch that I mentioned in the book, A Minute Post. It was so so brilliant, and it was just like a little flicker, took like a minute.
Which is like that, teaching brevity and even short stories or writing or sketches. Like a lot of people, it seems like it would be an easy lesson, but people are like, no, we don't want to end it when it naturally should end. We're going to keep going.
Well, SNL seems to be the worst at that, but it's true. Keep it short. Stupid.
Yeah, once you get it, it's good. The other thing I wanted to ask you, just based on a lot of the music that you were talking about in the book, one of my favorite 80s bands that I think is maybe the most underrated band of the 80s, kind of fits into the genre, and I was curious if you'd heard of them. The Sound, Adrian Borland's band, The Sound. Are you familiar at all?
I'm only tangentially familiar.
I think you will like them.
Check them out.
Yeah, there's an album called From the Lion's Mouth that they did in 1982. They were on Echo and the Bunnymen's label.
Oh, a Corova,
yeah. And they kind of sound like I always cheekily say they sound like the reputation Joy Division has.
Wow. Okay. Wow. That sounds. Tell me the album name.
It's called From the Lion's Mouth.
Okay.
All their records are good, but that one's really great.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Into It. 1982 is like I'm writing a novel right now, and it's set in 1982.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. It's a pregnant moment in life. So.
Yeah.
No, that sounds great. I'm always, things slip through the cracks. You're like, how did I miss that?
Yeah.
But I definitely know the name.
And that's one that when I lived in London, I was on Berwick Street at a record store, and I was looking through a 1 pound 12 inches bin, and the cover of one of the 12 inches, like, this looks kind of weird. And I was like, oh, have I never heard this before? Just like,
I need
yeah,
this.
yeah, and it's those moments where I'm just like, occasionally I get it now. There'll be an old band I never heard of that I'll be able to check out, but just that like, what is this going to sound like kind of thing, and then it just blows your mind.
Yeah. I just ordered I was hearing this something. I listen to WFMU. I'm wearing a t-shirt.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
But I just was like, I heard his band is called Fuchsia. It was like a sort of proggy, like, early 70s. And I was just like, I am going to order this. I just had to get it. So yeah, you just get, it just has, it was kind of like, English folk, British folk tradition plus interesting prog, interesting time signatures.
Yep.
I was like, this is my thing. I love this. So it's so neat to still discover things.
Yeah, stuff that's from 40, 50 years ago you never heard of. Like, that's what college radio, I feel like, is the last bastion of all the things we've been talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's really, I've been thinking about the fact that like when we were teenagers, for us to listen to music that was 30 years old would have been like ridiculous. We would
Glen Miller.
listen to Glen Miller. But right now, it would mean listening to, Boy Dog Pondering.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
or just like, the thing is rock and roll has become, has extended over, and pop music has such a history that it doesn't seem odd. But if you think about it, it's kind of crazy. Like someone said, "Sweet Dreams are made of this" by the Eurythmics. It's closer to World War II than to this moment.
Yeah, which is nuts.
Because think about how futuristic that was.
Oh, yeah.
Futuristic synth pop. And then it was like, now it's like, wow, it's closer to Glen Miller.
Yeah, 20 years after Pet Sounds.
Yeah.
Like, very, very long journey. Have you ever seen the TV show The Adventures of Pete and Pete?
Oh, I know it very, very well. Very well, because my Will McRobb was the writer, and I got to know him through my sister, and I've gotten to know Sid Straw, who was Miss Fingerwood in that amazing episode. Some of those, it was so, it's one of my favorite things, Ken. It's one of my,
because I was like, how could it, like, reading the book, I was like, suburban New Jersey, the bands, like everything, like this it just clicks in.
It was all so much. I mean, they had like Michael Stipe and Miracle Legion and just
Gordon Gano. Yeah, I've had Will on the show. We've talked because and he sort of put into words something that I hadn't quite realized of what drew me to the things I like. Yeah. And he said the thing that he tries to do with everything he does is there's 4 things he tries to hit. And he wants things to be funny, sad, weird, and beautiful.
Boy.
And I'm like, yeah, you're right. Everything I like the most, that's the 4 things it hits. Yeah,
I think that's pretty much it. In my book, I sort of say something like to the effect of about a song. I said it was sort of everything I liked. It was kind of like that. It was like beautiful, obscure, sad, and something. Yeah, I mean that palette. Yes, that's my palette too.
If people like Pete and Pete, I think they'll like your book. Like they seem to kind of link together.
I think they would. I got a really nice note from Janet Beveridge Bean from 11th Dream Day. Which is a really wonderful band. And actually, I name-checked it in my book. Just sort of tangentially. And she got... someone tipped her to the book. And she just said, "You've written a really funny, cool memoir." And it totally made my day. And that kind of stuff, that's all I need. That's huge to me. So that felt like a huge round of applause.
People whose work that you appreciate, tell you that they like something you did, like that's the best.
Oh, it's the best, man. It is. I mean, I'd love to sell a bunch of books, and maybe I will sell some, but that just boosted my feelings. Everything, and right now I'm writing a new book. I'm just writing something. I'm just going to keep going. You have to. I started writing this book in 2017. Old emails reveal. And I've just it was a real thing. But now I'm just going to try to move on.
Keep going.
But it's gratifying to be able to have stories to tell and to be able to sort of make it more than just about your story, but maybe hopefully something universal. And I appreciate you having me because I feel like maybe you see something in it that resonates, to you.
Absolutely. I loved it. So I'll put links for people to buy it. And if people like this show, they will like the book. Like that's kind of how it works.
Sure.
Well, thank you so much for doing this. It's been so nice to talk to you. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Likewise, Ken. It's been great. Totally appreciate it.
There you go. That's David. What a good dude. As I said, very interesting book, fascinating stories, not just sort of Hollywood adjacent stories, but just sort of Gen X growing up with pop culture stories. Very much enjoyed the book. I think you will too if you like this show. So go to davidkleinauthor.org and you can find out where to buy all his stuff and all that kind of thing. And anything else you might need. You can email me if you have questions or you didn't write these things down or you have guests you want to have on, so you try to get me to have on the show or books I should read at tvguidancecounselor@gmail.com or ken at icanread.com or kenreadtvgc@gmail.com. My breath control's been terrible lately, and I've lost weight, so I don't know what that's about. But anyway, you can go there, or you can become a patron, patreon.com/tvguidancecounselor. As little as $1 a month really helps the show. I know times are tough for everybody financially. Yes, including me. I won't get into it. But if you have $1 a month, that helps. $5 a month and up, you would get a PDF of the TV guide we discuss every week that we discuss a TV guide. But you have access to the entire archives. So even if we don't discuss one that week, you can go back and get ones from previous weeks. Anyway, speaking of the opposite of previous weeks, which would be next week, I'll have a brand new episode. So I hope you see it. I hope to see you then for that brand new episode of TV Guidance Counselor.
They basically had two speeds, coke and heroin.